Good afternoon, everybody, from the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. I'm Josh Byerly. We'd like to welcome you to today's news conference as we take a look at the upcoming historic demonstration mission by SpaceX to the International Space Station. We are joined by an entire panel today, which includes Bill Gerstenmaier, NASA's Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations. We also have Mike Suffredini, the Program Manager for the International Space Station. We are also joined by Alan Lindemoyer, NASA's Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Program Manager, as well as Elon Musk, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Designer for SpaceX. And finally, we have Holly Ridings, who is the NASA Flight Director, who will be on console during the upcoming flight. We'll start off with Bill.
Thanks, Josh. Today we did the flight readiness review for the SpaceX Dragon flight. This was not a shuttle flight review in the sense that we didn't really look at all the aspects of the launch. We really just focused on the ISS portion of the launch. And this is very similar to what we've done in the past for the automated transfer vehicle and also for the Japanese transfer vehicle, the HTV. What we do in the review is we make sure that the station is ready to receive the vehicles, that the teams are trained, that the crew on orbit is ready, that we thought about all the contingencies that could occur, and we're really ready to go through the demonstration mission. And again, I think the teams are very well prepared. The SpaceX team gave us a nice kind of introductory review of what they've done in their preparations. It was a very thorough discussion by the SpaceX team. They've done a tremendous amount of work getting ready to get to this point. They've done a lot of work in terms of both hardware, getting it ready to go fly, getting the software ready to go fly. I was very impressed with the overall work. Again, I think they've made tremendous progress as a team. So they've got one more long simulation to go do, one more simulation to do, and Holly will probably talk about that some more. There's still some work we need to do, some more software testing that needs to get done, some other activities. Everything looks good as we head towards the April 30th launch date, but I would caution us all that there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done. There's some things we've got to do on our side to validate some software and things after the SpaceX team completes, and our teams will have to go look at that data and then make sure that it's all okay. So I think there's a good chance to make the 30th. We'll continue to work through this stuff over the next week or so. On the 23rd of April, we'll get back together again and just kind of assess where we are overall to see how things are moving forward. But again, tremendous progress by the teams. I was very impressed with the discussion between the NASA teams and the SpaceX teams. When I hear the discussion back and forth, it's really one team. They're really focused on how do we deliver cargo to space station, how do we get ready for this next phase, and these teams have worked just phenomenally well together. So with that kind of attitude, I look forward to good activities as we move towards the launch. So thank you. Mike?
Well, good afternoon. We're always excited when we have a vehicle coming to ISS, but this will be one of those historic launches with the first commercial vehicle coming to ISS to provide supplies, not only for this particular flight, which is a demonstration flight, but really for the long term. This is the beginning of a long-term effort to have the commercial vehicles supply the ISS, which is a critical need for the program. As Bill said, we had a successful flight readiness review, and then prior to that, the program has what we call a stage ops readiness review. And at that time, what we verify in this new world order is really safety of the vehicle within a sphere around the ISS. We call it the approach ellipsoid, and it's about 2 kilometers by 4 kilometers around the ISS. And the requirements we levy on the SpaceX company and any of the vehicles that want to do a burn that enters them into or aims them to come into that ellipsoid requires that they meet our requirements. And all of those requirements are built around safety of the vehicles and safety of the crew themselves. And so we have spent the last couple of years, several months with our SpaceX colleagues working through the verifications, all of the requirements that had to be met, the testing that we dictated, but also the testing they did on their own to validate the performance of the vehicle. And then as this part of the process, as we get closer to launch, we're cleaning up our verifications where they complete testing, they send the reports to say this is what occurred during the test, we review the reports, we review the data, and confirm that the vehicle's ready to go. So at this stage of preparations, as we get close to a potential April 30th launch, we're in good shape. We still have some what we refer to as non-standard open work, and that just means there's some of the verification closures need to be completed. They're related to hardware in the loop type testing. It's where you get the hardware and the software together and make sure they operate the way you expect. So we have the last little bit of that testing to go, and then our SpaceX colleagues will submit their reports to us based on the plan we have, and we'll review those, and assuming everything's fine, we'll be ready for the launch. What is unique about this, however, is you notice I didn't say we had any requirements for mission success, and that's what our SpaceX colleagues have been working on, and Bill referred to, since we're not responsible for the ascent phase or even the early on orbit phase. This is the responsibility of our SpaceX colleagues, and we've left it to them to define their requirements and then meet the requirements prior to launch. And it's been a learning experience, I think, for both NASA and SpaceX. We've really grown together as two organizations, and I would say not only is the logistics that this vehicle will bring, not only this flight but in subsequent flights, important to this program, but I think the relationship between a company like SpaceX and NASA in terms of our design engineers and even us program managers have learned a lot from one another, and so that's been a great benefit for us as a program. Quickly, the SpaceX will bring up this vehicle, even though it's a demo flight, will bring up 521 kilograms of cargo to the ISS, so we are going to utilize the flight for real hardware that is necessary for ISS. And in addition to that, and an important aspect, unique aspect of the SpaceX will be the return of cargo, and we have about 660 kilograms of cargo that will be returned. Some of it we would like to get back and refurbish for subsequent flights. And so this is a very important flight for us, and we're utilizing it as such. However, each piece of hardware that's going up and each piece we've put on there to come home, we did do an assessment. Since this is a demo flight, we did an assessment and said, if things didn't quite work out, is that okay? And we didn't put anything on the vehicle we didn't think that we could stand to not get home. But it is always an advantage to us whenever we can try to get additional information, and that's what we focused on this flight in the return manifest. Just real quickly, I want to talk about where we are in the space station on orbit relative to this flight and all the other work. The crew has been focusing on research, as we've talked about a lot over the last several get-togethers, and as we approach this period that includes the SpaceX launch and berthing, we have a number of activities going on. We have the 47P launch that's scheduled next on April the 20th, and it will dock to the ISS on the 22nd. Shortly after that, the crew will return home. Dan and Anton and Anatoly will come home on the 27th of April. And then after that, we'll prepare Don and Andre will prepare for the berthing of the SpaceX vehicle. And prior to that time, I think Holly might touch on a little bit, we've done the prep work. The crew actually is getting additional training on orbit. But not only do they need to do that training for what's going to happen on the 3rd of May, but they also have to do all the work they need to do to get the other crew ready to come home, and also to have the docking of this 47 Progress. And then after the SpaceX gets there, we have the next Soyuz that's going to come up and dock, and then after that, we'll have the release and return of the SpaceX demo vehicle. So you can see that while we are going to focus on getting this new vehicle there, it is a workhorse for us. It is intended to be a logistics vehicle that gets to station, it delivers its cargo, and then it departs so the next vehicle can take its slot, or so that the crew then can focus on research. And it will begin that way with the very first flight. We're not opening up a big hole and having this demo take effect. It's an integrated part of an overall plan, and we intend to treat it as such. And so we're looking very forward to that flight. And with that, I'll hand it over to Al Lindenmore.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. So when the decision was made to retire the shuttle and continue our exploration program, we very much would have liked to purchase commercial services to resupply the space station. But those capabilities just simply didn't exist in the U.S. markets. So we decided to think like an investor. We wanted to become a consumer of services rather than a customer of requirements. That would be our more traditional approach. Write our requirements, go hire a prime contractor, and develop the capability. But we believed that these capabilities were within the grasp of U.S. commercial industry. So 5 years ago, we set these objectives for the program. You could pull those up if you would. We had to learn to think like an investor. We wanted to place strategic financial investments to help stimulate the commercial space industry. Then we put some structure around those investments where we developed the program to have the companies demonstrate these capabilities with the goal of achieving safe, reliable, and cost-effective services. We were looking to help lower the cost of access to space. We believed that that would, of course, help us out and also be the key to opening up new markets in low Earth orbit. And the third thing we said is, if we're successful in placing these investments and have solid commercial partners, well, then it's important to be able to sustain that new capability, sustain the new market that's created, and NASA would become a customer for those services. And by reducing the cost, we hope that this will also be sustained by opening up new markets by this lower cost access to space. Well, we followed through on that promise. In December of 2008, not only had we awarded the SpaceX agreements for the development program for the new commercial services, but we also awarded the resupply contracts for the space stations. So we certainly followed through our promise to become a very interested customer. Next chart. So this is a summary of the new capabilities we're about to see demonstrated with SpaceX. We did sign the agreement with SpaceX in August of 2006. We've monitored SpaceX's performance over the years through a series of pre-negotiated milestones. And this is also a difference from our traditional approach of regular contracting. In this case, we only made payments after the milestone was achieved. It was up to SpaceX to provide the necessary funding and resources necessary to meet each one of these incremental milestones. And then when they were successfully made, we made our incremental payments. To date, we've paid 37 out of a total of 40 for $381 million of investment out of a possible $396 million total on the agreement. All the milestones are completed except for the last three, this upcoming demonstration flight. This is the second demonstration under our SpaceX agreement. The first demonstration flight was completed for our program in December of 2010. A very successful first flight of the Dragon spacecraft on the Falcon 9, an orbital demonstration and return. Next chart, please. In addition, we also have a commercial partnership with Orbital Sciences. This is a very similar SpaceX agreement arrangement with Orbital. They started a year and a half later than our agreement with SpaceX, and they're also making very good progress. We'll see Orbital planning to fly later this year. They'll be starting with a maiden flight of their new launch vehicle, the Antares launch vehicle. This will be launched out of the brand new launch pad at Wallops Island, Virginia, off the eastern shore of Virginia. So we're looking for that later in the year. They have 5 milestones left: the completion of the first stage assembly, the maiden test flight. Then they will complete the vehicle for the demonstration to the International Space Station. And that agreement will finish up with the flight to the station later in the year as well. Next chart. So this is a history of the performance of the milestones that we established in the agreement. Up top, you'll see SpaceX agreement starting in 2006. It started with the series of design reviews, system requirements reviews, preliminary design reviews, moving into a critical design phase. Then SpaceX moved on to the test and production phase. We saw the maiden test flight in 2010. And then last year, we requested and received additional funding for our program to help improve the chances of mission success for our program. So we worked together, SpaceX and I, and we came up with a series of additional milestones to add additional testing to help improve the chance of mission success. This was primarily system-level testing. Last year, SpaceX completed system-level thermal vacuum tests, electromagnetic interference tests, acoustic testing, and all that was of very high importance to us. There was a lot of learning going on, and I think it is going to be very, very valuable to us. So that was completed last year. And now we're moving into the finishing up our demonstration phase with the demonstration to the station. So let's talk about the objectives of this flight. We call it C2, that stands for COTS 2. It's the COTS Demonstration 2 flight. This flight originally was to be a flyby to the station. That is, it was to do a rendezvous with the space station, and then it is to do a flyby beneath the station, no closer than 2.5 kilometers, or about a mile and a half. And during this period, it is going to execute prerequisite maneuvers that are required before we give the final approval for the final approach and berthing with the space station. These are the same type demonstration objectives that were accomplished with other visiting vehicles to the station, the ATV and the HTV, all demonstrated before the final approach that they had the ability to do GPS navigation, relative navigation, absolute navigation, the ability to do abort maneuvers, the ability to free drift and hold for a while. These are the requirements that must be achieved before the go is given to do the final approach. That would be a very successful mission under the C2 program, and then it would re-enter and be recovered. SpaceX approached us last year and said they would like to attempt to also complete the berthing, the final approach and berthing to the demonstration on the upcoming flight. So after reviewing the proposal and doing the required safety analysis to be assured that the vehicle and the systems are ready to go, we agreed to give SpaceX that opportunity for actual completing the berthing demonstration on this flight. That will also include demonstrating the LiDAR sensors. Those are the radars and the rendezvous sensors that gives you the range and the range rate information as you approach the station. They'll be doing some close-in retreat demonstrations, hold demonstrations, and finally the vehicle will be captured by the robotic arm and then berthed to the Earth-facing side of the forward node on the station. After about 18 days of demonstrating the transfer of cargo to and from the station, we'll see the Dragon unberth from the station and then return home. We call this mission C2+. It's the C2 mission plus the additional objectives of completing the C3 objectives on this flight. So let's see, if you run the video now, I guess we'll take a look at what we can expect to see. Targeting now for the end of the month, we'll see the Falcon 9 lift off from a beautiful day at the Cape. About 3 minutes later, we'll see the stage separation between the first and upper stages on the Falcon 9. Then about 10 minutes into flight, it'll be in orbit. The Dragon and its trunk will separate from the upper stage. About a minute later, the solar arrays will be deployed. And then it'll begin its phasing maneuvers to the space station. It takes about a day to get to the proper phasing and rendezvous with the station. The second day will be used to complete the demonstration maneuvers I talked about. And if all goes well, SpaceX will re-rendezvous with the station, and on the third day, we'll see the final approach. And the vehicle will be captured by the arm and berthed. This operation takes about 8 hours by the time you get in to the final approach to the actual berthing with the station. After a few weeks on orbit, it'll be unberthed. And then it'll be preparing for a deorbit burn and reentry. About 2 to 4 orbits later, we'll see the Dragon reenter, parachute deploy, and splash down off the coast of California. That would be a very good day. I wanted to thank everybody. We're certainly very excited to be here. This has been a great partnership between NASA and SpaceX. I want to thank my team. Mike Horkachuk, project executive, has been with us since the beginning, and his assistant Warren, who's helped make available the vast resources at NASA to help SpaceX. So thank you. It's been a great partnership. We're really excited and looking forward to the launch. Elon?
All right. All right, well, I'd just like to start off by saying thank you to NASA for giving us this opportunity. As you may have heard me say before, SpaceX wouldn't have been able to get started without the amazing work that NASA had done in the past, and we wouldn't have gotten this far without the help of NASA. So I'd like to be real clear in expressing my appreciation for that. And I'd also like to express a note of appreciation to the American public who are ultimately funding this, and just want people to know that we've really done everything we can to make sure that this mission is going to go well. It's been a huge amount of hard work by the SpaceX team in partnership with NASA, and I think we've got a pretty good shot. But it is worth emphasizing that there's a lot that can go a lot that can go wrong in a mission like this, because you've got to have the success of the rocket, and then you've got to have the success of the spacecraft. Now we've launched the rocket twice before, and we've launched the spacecraft once, but they're still relatively new. And then there's the whole proximity operations and berthing system, which is going to be tested for the first time in space. And so there's no space station on the ground. So our work to date has been done by simulation and by approximating the circumstances that it would find in orbit and approaching the space station. So I think that's just important to appreciate, that this is pretty tricky. And I think also for the public out there, they may not realize that the space station is zooming around the Earth every 90 minutes, and it's going at sort of 17,000 miles an hour. And so you've got to launch up there, and you've got to rendezvous and be tracking the space station to within inches, really. And this is something that's going 12 times faster than a bullet from an assault rifle. So it's hard. But I think we've got a pretty good chance. But there's, like I said, I want to emphasize this. This is, as has been said by other people in the panel, that this is a test flight. So if we don't succeed in berthing on this mission, then we've got a couple of more missions later this year that, and I think we'll succeed on one of those. Yeah, so I think we've got some videos of the preparation that we can show. There we have the rocket in the hangar at Cape Canaveral. The Dragon spacecraft. Now, one of the things that's worth noting about Dragon is that we've tried to design something that is very similar between cargo transport and astronaut transport. So it's we expect there to be relatively few differences between the two. There's Dragon mounted on Falcon 9. here we're doing a wet dress rehearsal, which means we load the liquid oxygen and kerosene, the fuel of the rocket, and just make sure everything's okay. And coming up soon, we'll have the static fire, where we'll light the engines and shake things up a little, but keep the rocket held down, and then see if everything's okay before. And we'll spend several days analyzing that information, and if that's looking good, then it'll be okay to launch the rocket in theory. So, do we have another video? Pardon me? Oh, COTS milestones. So we've got one more video to show. So just elements of the rocket and spacecraft being tested. And I think it is worth emphasizing that the Falcon 9 has flown twice before, and Dragon has flown once. So I think a lot of people in the public may not be aware of that. So the thing that's really being tested on this flight, hopefully, is the proximity operations and berthing system. So, and there are other things as well, like the solar panels and a few other things. But it's worth noting the rocket has flown twice, and the spacecraft has flown once. All right. Well, with that.
All right. Well, good morning, actually afternoon, everyone. My name is Holly Ridings, and I'm the lead NASA flight director for the SpaceX Dragon demo mission. I'd like to tell you guys today that the operations teams have been working extremely hard for multiple years, really preparing for the launch and leading up to this day so that we could come and explain to you exactly what we've built together. The first part, of course, is when you incorporate a new team, a new partner, in this case, SpaceX, our first commercial partner, into the space station. There's a lot of technical things you do, the nuts and bolts, make sure that we can talk back and forth between the two control teams, the control team in Hawthorne in California at the SpaceX facility, and of course, our team here in Houston, commanding back and forth telemetry, back and forth, and as well as information that can pass all the way from their facility in Hawthorne up to the space station. So we put that infrastructure in place to incorporate them as a new partner. We move on from there really to build the framework of how we're going to fly. This takes multiple years really for their team to learn about the space station, for us to learn about the Dragon. It's really a partnership. They are certainly the experts in the Dragon, we're the experts in the space station, and we treat it as one team. It's two dynamic vehicles flying in space together, and it's extremely important that you communicate and understand each team's roles and responsibilities. As was alluded to earlier, our role here in Houston is really the safety of the crew on board the space station itself, and then the SpaceX Dragon team is responsible for the mission success. And we've built a framework working together where we should be able to get both of those items successfully accomplished. We write documentation, procedures, flight rules, the things you're familiar with the other vehicles that NASA has flown in space, and we make sure that the teams are trained to use all of that information. So we practice using our simulation capability, learning how that process is going to work, coming up with failure scenarios and talking through how we're going to react and recover from those. And again, as was alluded to earlier, we've performed a series of those for all the different phases of the flight. The last simulation, just the final clean run for the polish before we go and fly here shortly, will actually be next week. And so we're really looking forward to doing this run one last time on the ground before we get on orbit. The other big piece of our operations team, of course, is our space station crew, since they will be performing the grapple of the Dragon vehicle, the berthing to the space station. And so that team, our crew team, has been working hard to prepare for this mission as well. The time frame that we're discussing launching in is one in which we've got 2 crew members available to perform the Dragon operations. And so we've spent a lot of time communicating with them, Don Pedret and Andre Kuipers, making sure that they understand exactly what will be expected of them. They, of course, were trained on the ground, but they have been on orbit for a while we've continued to work down here and learn new things. And so we spend a lot of time communicating all of that information to make sure, really, as the third piece of our operations team, they're ready to go for us. So now we're going to kind of walk through the mission that we've put together. So if I could have the first still, please. You can see the different phases of the flight. So we've got our launch, followed by the phasing where the Dragon's still far away from the space station. As was mentioned earlier, we'll come up and do a fly under of the space station all the way around. We've got some demonstration maneuvers, followed by all of the new activities in the rendezvous and proximity operations. The berthing, finally the departure, re-entry, and recovery. And I've got some graphics in a minute, but before we leave this slide, in terms of roles and responsibilities, really the launch and the phasing piece is, again, SpaceX responsibility until they get close to the space station. That operations team is taking care of the Dragon and designed all of that independently. We have understanding of exactly how that will go, but certainly that's their responsibility. When we come up close to the space station, then the interaction with the NASA team begins, and we've got some gates and some process in place where we make sure that the safety of that space station, our space station, is protected. And again, once the Dragon has left after departure, the SpaceX team takes over again and works with the FAA colleagues and brings the Dragon home and performs the recovery. Again, certainly that has NASA cargo, so we're interested in it, but from an operations sense, the Dragon team performs that function in terms of the departure and the recovery. If we go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that I mentioned was the demonstration objectives. These were touched on a little bit earlier. We do have some demonstrations to really talk about the abort capability. That's one of our primary sort of pieces of our safety infrastructures, the capability to always safely perform an abort where, if there was an issue, the Dragon could fly away from the space station to prevent having any type of collision. And so that's a very important aspect of our safety framework. Different pieces of navigation. As you get closer to the space station, you have to be able to navigate more accurately. And so we make sure that all of those pieces work correctly. Communication, of course, to dynamic vehicles in space need to be able to talk to each other. And then just the general controllability in terms of the guidance and navigation, how the engines work, those type of activities. This has all been tested extensively by the SpaceX team on the ground. We've had NASA folks as well involved in the verification. But these are really the very important, critical pieces that we want to validate on orbit, look at that capability before we use it in a safety critical situation. So it's really a building block approach where we execute a demonstration objective is what we call it. So a piece of functionality of the spacecraft, make sure it works, and then later in the mission we will need that capability. Let's see, next page. So here's our mission profile. This is obviously a two-dimensional representation of two dynamic vehicles moving very quickly in space, as Elon alluded to. But if you look at the red arrow down in the bottom right-hand corner and think about the Dragon moving in that direction over time, you can see down in the far right-hand corner, that's really the phasing time frame. It's not to scale, so that time frame could be, a day or 2 or 3, depending on exactly how long the Dragon's going to take to phase to the space station. So that capability, again, is the function of the Dragon control team. So the Dragon will come up, finish its phasing, and where the red arrow is kind of pointing at the green line, that's about 10 kilometers underneath the space station, and it'll perform what we call a burn, so turn on its engines, maneuver the spacecraft, and head up that green line towards the space station, ready to perform a fly under of the space station at 2.5 kilometers. And so that fly under is very important to us because it's the first time the Dragon and the space station will communicate with each other, an absolute requirement for proximity operations. It's the first time that the crew on board the ISS will send a command to Dragon and get response. This is just a test command, so it's a light on the Dragon, but it's leading towards the crew potentially needing to send more invasive commands such as a hold or retreat or even an abort later, and command the Dragon when it's at the capture point. We're also gathering navigation data. So the way the two vehicles navigate together is a relative where you get pieces of information from both vehicles and you do a calculation, and then they know exactly where they are in space relative to each other. And so we're gathering information to make sure that navigation system works. So we're flying to the space station, gather all that information. The Dragon's going to head back down to about 10 kilometers below, and then do a big lap around the space station called the fly around, where it comes up the left-hand side of that graphic. It's phased fairly far out in front of the space station by then, greater than 200 kilometers. And so it'll perform, again, a burn, another turn on the engines, and move the spacecraft headed up and over the space station, come across the top of the space station, and then down the backside relative to the graphic, again, fairly far out from the space station, beyond 200 kilometers. So that entire process should take just about a full day, on the order of 22 to 24 hours to complete. Let's see, next slide, please. So now we're kind of back where we started at our red arrow, roughly, again, that day later, and we're headed again back up to 2.5 kilometers below the space station. Remember, that was the distance that we did the fly under the day before. You can see the green dot. That's where we cross into what we call integrated operations. And so I mentioned earlier sort of the responsibilities of the different team members. Our responsibility in Houston being the safety of the space station and the crew on board the space station. And so when we're inside of integrated operations, which is in close proximity to the space station, the team here in Houston has authority over the mission. Of course, again, we're working as a team and in partnership and communicating with the Dragon team, but we do have the final authority so that we can keep that safety at the very top of the priority list. We've come up to 2.5 kilometers inside of the integrated operations, and now we're going to head up to 1.4 kilometer. The little dots, the little red dots, again represent burns, or again, a time where Dragon will fire its engines and adjust its height relative to the space station, so it's headed up closer to the space station. So now we're flying under at 1.4 kilometers. Again, next red dot, this is our approach initiation. So this is the burn that will take the Dragon on an intercept trajectory with a position directly below the space station. We call it the R bar, so it's the radius of this between the space station and the Earth. If you drew a line from the center of the space station to the center of the Earth, and 350 meters below the space station, you put a little Dragon, that's where it's headed. So it's going to end up in that position, and eventually we'll get to 350, move another 100 meters, and actually pause automatically at the 250 meter hold point. Next page. So now we're up again on the R bar. At 250 meters, the Dragon is holding, and we've got some more of our demonstration objectives that we need to complete. These involve the crew with some of the commanding. So you can see the green Dragon represented on the slide will approach from 250, so it starts moving towards the space station. The crew will then command a retreat, and so it will turn and head back towards that 250 meter hold point. The graphic has all of the Dragon pictures spread out on the left so you can see the up and back, but they actually all will happen on that R-bar line, just forwards and backwards. It's just hard to represent on the slide. So now we've gone to commanded the retreat. We're headed back to 250. Then the Dragon team in Hawthorne will send the Dragon again towards the space station. The crew will tell the Dragon to hold. That'll be at about 220 meters. And so that will be the last of our go, no go objectives in terms of the demonstration objectives. We do have go, no go criteria, and that's our terminology that we use in our flight rules. We're here in Mission Control Houston and with Mission Control in Hawthorne at SpaceX. We take a poll and make sure that all of the systems on board the ISS, all the systems on board the Dragon, any type of failure detection, the robotic arm, the cameras, basically everything you need in order to do that next step of the mission is in the configuration you expected. And then after you've had that communication between the two teams and everything is in the proper configuration, then the go is allowing the Dragon to proceed and continue with the next step of the mission. So when we use go, no go terminology, that's exactly what we're talking about. So at this point, we're 220 meters below the space station. We've completed all of our demonstrations. Again, the controllability, the navigation, the abort. We have taken the poll and made sure that we've got all of the functionality we need, and we're headed on up towards the space station again. We're going to cross into what's called the keep out sphere. So it's a 200-meter circle around the space station, which we kind of use as a line of demarcation for us to know that we need all of that functionality checked out before we head past that point. We're going to head all the way to 30 meters. If I could have this slide back, please, might be easier. Thank you. So we're going to head all the way to 30 meters, and the Dragon, again, will automatically stop at 30 meters. We're going to perform another one of those go, no goes, so a poll to make sure we have all the functionality. At this point, the crew is heavily involved with us. They've been monitoring the Dragon, certainly throughout those demonstration objectives where they were sending several commands, and also as the Dragon headed towards the space station with the capability, if necessary, to go ahead and take action. Although the Dragon vehicle itself is designed by the SpaceX team to really be very automated and to take care of itself, the crew is really there kind of as a safety net, certainly with the first flight of the demonstration capability. We really would like to make sure we've got all of the crew involved as well as the vehicle itself. So we're at 30 meters. We've taken our poll. Now we're going to head up to the 10-meter point. You may also hear this referred to as the capture point. The Dragon will hold again automatically 10 meters from the space station. Another poll to make sure we've got all of the technical capability required, and then we give a final go for capture. We tell the crew that we are ready for that capture, and then they really take over from that point. They have a command to inhibit the thrusters on the space station, so those will not fire. They'll take the Dragon to what we call free drift, so again, where the thrusters do not fire, and then they will drive the robotic arm, the SSRMS, out and capture the Dragon. Obviously, you don't want thrusters on either spacecraft firing when you've got your robotic arm connecting the two until it's had an opportunity to rigidize, otherwise you might harm it. So that process will be taken care of by the crew. Now we've captured the Dragon successfully. The next couple steps, we are headed towards doing a berthing of the Dragon. We do some system configuration to make sure it's ready to be berthed. We'll make sure that the common berthing mechanism, the passive side that's on the Dragon, is clean of any type of debris. And then we'll head on in robotically with the crew, flying the robotic arm to berth the Dragon to the Node 2 nadir position, again, the Earth-facing position. All of that activity from coming up the 2.5 kilometers all the way up the R-bar takes place in one day. It's a fairly long day. It's about 7.5 hours for that rendezvous and proximity operation. The next morning, we'll get up and open the hatch for the first time and perform the very first cargo transfer. We're going to perform roughly 25 hours of cargo transfer, both unpacking and then packing the Dragon while it is on orbit. And then several weeks later, we'll get the Dragon ready to come on home. If I could have the next slide. And so here's our reentry and recovery. In terms of space station operations, we take the robotic arm and unberth the Dragon from Node 2 Nadir, unberth it from the CBM. We'll hold it out on the end of the robotic arm, make sure it's got all of its navigation capability up and running, and then we release the Dragon. It performs a series of burns, again, maneuvers. There are 3 of them. So one, you can see where the green Dragon is, a second one at kind of the end of that half circle, and then a third one at the end of the second half circle. So a series of 3, we call them departure burns. And then the Dragon will head away from the space station. We check that it is on a safe trajectory away from the space station. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the operations team in Hawthorne then is in control again, of course, of the Dragon in terms of outside of integrated operations. And so they will make sure that it's ready to deorbit and come on home, splash down in the Pacific, and then they've got their recovery operations that they are going to run out to bring the Dragon on into Long Beach.